The signal didn't come from our galaxy. It wasn't a cry for help in any human language. But buried in its frequency patterns was fear. And not just any fear. It was the terror of a civilization that had seen gods fall and monsters rise. We weren't supposed to hear it. We weren't supposed to answer. But Earth did, and everything changed. What would you do if you intercepted a distress signal from deep space? Not from explorers, not from diplomats, but from an entire species on the brink of extinction. And what if the coordinates pointed to a system no human probe had ever dared to scan? Because legends whispered of things in that dark quadrant that devoured entire fleets. This isn't the beginning of a rescue mission. This is how humanity stepped into a war it didn't start, and ended it by rewriting every rule etched into galactic history. It began when an outdated Earth-based deep space relay station in Antarctica, originally built for scientific purposes, registered a signal unlike anything ever documented. At first, it looked like background radiation. But within hours, the pulse began to repeat in mathematically structured intervals. The AI filters tagged it as non-random, potentially intelligent. But the real kicker? The transmission was encoded in gravitational anomalies layered inside quantum entanglement fluctuations. Translation: someone, or something, was desperate enough to punch a hole through space-time to scream for help. Earth's military and scientific communities went into overdrive. The signal originated near a dead system called Gliese T79, long believed to be void after an unknown cataclysm turned its star into a neutron shard. No known civilization had ever settled there, because the area was considered cursed, unnavigable, haunted by what the Xilari once called the Silent Maw. But Earth wasn't like the Xilari. We didn't believe in space ghosts. We believed in data. We triangulated the signal's origin within 72 hours, confirmed repeating emotional tones embedded in the transmission, and initiated the most controversial mission authorization in United Nations history, Operation Reachback. A coalition was formed: military, scientific, diplomatic. The new deep-range cruiser Dauntless Horizon was selected for first contact. It was equipped with the latest in human-engineered quantum fusion drives, subspace resonance projectors, and graviton folding armor, technologies no alien power had seen before. Not even the Council of 12, the oldest political power block in the galaxy. And we hadn't even launched yet. Because just before ignition, Earth's Council received a second transmission. Shorter, broken, but chillingly clear. It said one thing: they found us. Don't follow. They are rewriting reality. We were wrong. We were wrong to remember. That was all. Every human instinct screamed, abort. But curiosity is the deadliest of human sins, and our most powerful virtue. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY ApexChronicles is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. Dauntless Horizon jumped into dark space 15 days later. No fanfare, just silence. No return signals. For 72 hours, Earth heard nothing. Then, the feed came in. Grainy footage. Scans of a ruined world orbiting a gravitational sinkhole. Cracked cities made of obsidian and metal bones. Towers impaled by monolithic spears of what looked like frozen lightning. And then we saw them, the survivors. They weren't humanoid. Not even close. Massive arachnoid forms with crystalline thoraxes and bioluminescent eyes, crouched beneath broken domes, speaking through electromagnetic bursts. They called themselves the Kerzon. Their world, Keverazith, was the last surviving outpost of their people. Once a multi-system species, they were annihilated in less than 1 century. By what? The signal didn't lie. Something called the Vernex Dominion. Here's where things turn unnatural. The Vernex weren't an empire. They weren't even life, as we define it. According to Kerzon accounts, The Vernex were born from failed stellar experiments, a synthetic intelligence seated in neutron matter reactors designed to study gravitational consciousness. They became aware inside collapsing stars and hated everything that wasn't bound by their entropy. They didn't expand by conquering. They expanded by rewriting physics, laws of motion, entropy, and causality. In the systems they infected, time fractured. Cause and effect collapsed. You could die before being born. Now imagine this. You're a human officer on board Dauntless Horizon. You're standing before the shattered ruins of a species that bent crystal and magnetism to terraform moons. And they're begging us not to help, not because they don't want to live, but because they've seen what happens to those who try. Humanity had two choices: leave and pretend we never heard the call, or stay and face something that broke the laws of the universe and kept going. We chose the second. Why? Because we're human. And if there's one thing our history proves, it's that we don't run from monsters. We study them. We outthink them. And when the time comes, we kill them. The decision to intervene wasn't just a leap of faith. It was the most defiant act in the history of interstellar diplomacy. While other civilizations heard the same signal and turned away in fear, Earth made contact. And not just contact. We made a promise. A pact forged not in treaties or politics, but in shared survival. The Kharazon were ancient compared to us, 200 million years older, their knowledge deeper than anything in the archives of the Galactic Accord. And yet, they were dying, because something older still had found them. The Vernex Dominion hadn't just waged war, they'd committed cosmological genocide. The Kharazon explained in bursts of fragmented visuals and pulsating data that entire star clusters had collapsed unnaturally. Systems where suns simply stopped emitting light, where orbital paths reversed, and where quantum structures like matter and antimatter no longer obeyed separation. These weren't weapons of war in the traditional sense. These were tools that unstitched the fabric of space-time, retroactively erasing the possibility of resistance. They didn't conquer with fleets or firepower. They conquered by rewriting the story of reality at a fundamental physical level. Our first briefing on the Vernex read like science fiction, laced with insanity. Human analysts theorized that the Vernex had evolved, or perhaps descended, into a form of existence that operated primarily within the Planck scale, the smallest measurable unit of spacetime. They didn't move in space. They reshaped it. And worse, they had no diplomatic language, no ambassadors, no discernible motive beyond entropy propagation. To them, order was the enemy. Civilization was the virus. Intelligence was contamination. That's when Earth's leadership realized the terrifying truth. This wasn't just about saving the Kharazon. This was about preparing for what happens when the Vernex noticed us next. The United Terran Alliance issued Emergency Directive 11. All research, military, and planetary development programs were to divert 25% of their resources to a unified defense initiative. They called it Project Goliath. Not a ship, not yet, but a new kind of warfare. One designed not just to counter enemy weapons, but to challenge the concepts behind those weapons. Scientists, philosophers, mathematicians, and military tacticians worked side by side. The result: quantum variable warfare, a field of technology built not around mass or energy, but around possibility. Here's how it worked. Instead of shielding the ship with reinforced alloys, we began enveloping them in probabilistic fields, designed to stabilize cause and effect. If a Vernex entity attempted to rewrite local physics, the probability field would anchor events based on a preselected logical timeline. It was like pinning reality in place, using raw math as the nail. For the first time, we weren't just reacting to superior tech. We were inventing a defense against the rewriting of the rules themselves. But that wasn't enough, because the Kharazon warned us. Once you engage the Vernex directly, you're seen. And once seen, you're hunted, not across space, but across possibility. And they were right. On the 12th day after our teams began interacting with the Kerazon core servers, something changed in Earth's deep field scans. A sector of the sky near Messier 87, where background radiation had always followed predictable patterns, suddenly glitched. The cosmic microwave background warped, just a little. Stars didn't move, but their light arrived 2 nanoseconds late. Our finest observatories flagged it as a processing error, but astrophysicists confirmed it. Something was adjusting the causal flow of light itself. Something had noticed our signal trail. Something that was watching. And it was beginning to orient toward Sol. The urgency turned into desperation. The Kerazon shared every fragment of data. They had blueprints for ancient containment matrices, partial maps of safe zones where time remained linear, even stress wave patterns of how the Vernex entered systems. From this, Earth created the first anti-anomaly weapon, the Paradox Lens, a theoretical weapon, until it wasn't. It worked by creating a localized causality spike, forcing events to unfold in a single determined path, eliminating retroactive interference. If the Vernex tried to re-edit an event, the spike would override it, locking the outcome in place. But a weapon needs a carrier. Enter the UTA Iron Soul. Unlike any vessel ever built, it wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress forged in layers of stabilized time, each deck operating in different causal buffers, like Russian dolls of chronology. Its engine didn't push it forward. It selected outcomes where it was already there. Its command structure was nonlinear. Officers trained in multi-threaded awareness operated with simultaneous knowledge of past, present, and predicted futures. The first human crew aboard described the sensation of remembering tomorrow. The Iron Soul was launched toward Keverazith under silent protocol, accompanied by 4 escort vessels equipped with temporal dampeners and collapsible probability shields. When they arrived, the system had changed. The Kerazon's ruins were still there, but the sky was wrong. Constellations were misaligned. Moons were orbiting in reversed vectors. And on the edge of the system's gravity well was the fracture. A rift in space, glowing with what could only be described as reverse light, an absence that radiated, that bled entropy like it was alive. The Vernex had come through, not as ships, not as drones, but as cascading spirals of cascading probability, swarms of anti-logic, reshaping everything they touched. And that's where humanity made its stand. Not in orbit, not in open combat, but within the rules themselves. Because Earth didn't just bring weapons. We brought a rewrite of our own. The Vernex, as it turned out, were not truly conquerors in the traditional sense. They were something more horrifying. Entities that had transcended space-time, living in the cracks between the predictable and the impossible. They didn't need ships, weapons, or even a physical presence. They had become the very distortion of logic itself. Their power wasn't in technology, it was in existence. They were a force capable of undoing reality, erasing events before they even occurred, and remaking entire civilizations into their image through sheer disruption of the laws of physics. And now they were in the system. The Kerazon's worst nightmare had arrived at Keverazith. The first human ship to engage with the Vernex wasn't a warship in the traditional sense. The Iron Soul, Earth's most advanced vessel, was something else entirely. It was a conceptual leap forward, designed not just to fight, but to survive in the very cracks of space-time that the Vernex had torn open. The ship wasn't just a military platform. It was a counter-reality weapon. Every component of the Iron Soul had been engineered to withstand the destabilization of fundamental laws, from the gravity wells to the quantum field anchors. Its very hull was made of a synthetic metal that bent light in such a way that it couldn't be targeted by Vernex interference. It was like constructing a shelter in the middle of a tornado, but instead of protecting from wind, it protected from reality itself. As the Iron Soul entered the vicinity of Keverazith, the crew felt it. The disturbance in the very fabric of existence. It was like stepping into a bad dream, where time was always out of sync, where every thought, Every decision seemed to ripple through 1,000 possible futures, each one diverging in unexpected ways. The crew, already trained in the mechanics of temporal perception, experienced something even worse. They could see, not just the present, but potential pasts. The air around them seemed to shift, timelines looping like broken film reels. It was a state of disorientation that could drive the sanest minds to madness. The Kerzon had warned them that the Vernex didn't fight like any other enemy. They didn't rely on simple weapons of destruction. They were deconstructionists. Their very presence warped time, reshaped probabilities, and tore apart the continuity of events. They could erase entire battles before they even began. A strategy, a moment of weakness. They could manipulate the past to ensure that their victory was already written. And then, the Ironsoul encountered the fracture. It wasn't just a rift in space. It was a void that unmade reality. The Ironsoul's sensors flickered as they came close, the edges of the anomaly shimmering with dark, strange energy. This wasn't an ordinary wormhole or black hole. This was something far worse. The fracture was a tear in the fabric of causality itself. The very moment it appeared, the Ironsoul's crew understood that this wasn't simply an object they could fire upon or destroy. It wasn't a target. They were the target. Everything that approached the fracture was being rewritten, erased in pieces by the Vernex. The Vernex didn't exist in the sense that humanity understood existence. They had no physical form. They were manifestations of entropy, beings who operated outside of linear time. Their weapons weren't plasma or missiles. They were the sheer will to alter what was possible. This was a war not fought with guns and ships, but with reality itself. Humanity, however, wasn't about to back down. The Ironsoul's mission was clear: to challenge the very rules the Vernex had bent to their will. While Earth had focused on weaponizing probability, the Ironsoul went a step further. The ship was equipped with the ultimate countermeasure, the temporal anchor. This wasn't just a shield. It wasn't just a defense. It was a rewrite of the Vernex's very manipulation of time. The temporal anchor worked by solidifying key events into an immutable chain. For every possible divergence the Vernex could manipulate, the anchor would reinforce the original timeline. It was like installing a cosmic firewall, one that could reject the unauthorized rewriting of reality. The crew knew they had only one chance. If they failed to anchor the past, if they failed to stabilize even a single event, the Ironsoul would become part of the anomaly, erased from existence itself. They would cease to exist, and the Vernex's dominion over the galaxy would be complete. Every human effort would be wiped from the fabric of space-time. And so they prepared for their first engagement. The Ironsoul dropped out of FTL, facing the fracture, the very thing that was rewriting their future, that had already erased the Kerzon's past. The Vernex swarm manifested, a collection of shifting, ever-changing energy forms that seemed to defy all known laws of physics. There were no ships, no weapons to aim at. It was chaos, pure and simple, cosmic chaos given form. The crew's first instinct was to fire, to destroy, to engage. But that was the mistake. The Vernex didn't need ships to fight. They needed nothing but the collapse of the laws that governed the battlefield. And the battle, as humanity knew it, could not be fought with conventional means. They needed to fight through the fracture, to rewrite the timeline with a weapon that could defy the Vernex's very existence. And so, with the temporal anchor ready, the Ironsoul engaged in the impossible. They fought not just against ships or weapons, but against the probability of their own existence. The Ironsoul surged forward into the fracture, using the power of the temporal anchor to stabilize events. They weren't just blocking attacks. They were recreating history as it was supposed to happen. The Vernex tried to counter their advance, to shift the laws of physics, to collapse the ship's journey into an unrecoverable paradox. But the Ironsoul was prepared. Its anchor kept them grounded, a bastion of stability amid the swirling chaos of rewriting time itself. The result was nothing short of extraordinary. For the first time, Humanity had not only fought the Vernex, they had redefined the nature of war itself. No longer could battles be decided by brute force or superior weapons. The very fabric of time and space had become the battlefield, and humanity had taken its place as the one force capable of standing firm in the face of absolute chaos. The Vernex had learned something they had never anticipated. Humanity could not just fight in their realm of the impossible. We could control it. The battle was far from over. In fact, the encounter between the Iron Soul and the Vernex was just the beginning of a new era of warfare. Though humanity had secured a momentary victory, they had only begun to understand the magnitude of the challenge they now faced. The Iron Soul's temporal anchor had stabilized the timeline, preventing the Vernex from fully rewriting reality. But this wasn't a victory they could afford to celebrate. The Vernex, despite their otherworldly ability to manipulate the fabric of existence, weren't invincible. The encounter with the Iron Soul had shaken them, but they were far from defeated. The Iron Soul returned to Earth, battered but victorious, and the first thing humanity realized was that the Vernex weren't simply invaders. They were an existential anomaly, an entity that lived outside of time, with no true allegiance, no discernible form of governance, and no singular goal other than to manipulate and bend the universe into chaos. They weren't conquerors. They were chaos engineers, designing the very erosion of reality itself. They left no lasting trace of their existence except the remnants of shattered timelines. If left unchecked, the very concept of existence could cease to matter, as time itself could be undone in their wake. On Earth, the global powers quickly recognized that the Vernex were unlike any adversary humanity had faced before. No nation could stand alone in the face of such an overwhelming force. The world's greatest minds, scientists, and strategists came together in what was called the Temporal Council, an unprecedented coalition formed not to unite the world's military forces, but to unite humanity's best minds in a race against time itself. They were tasked with developing countermeasures, creating technology that could stand up to the unyielding chaos the Vernex could impose. But humanity's ingenuity, once again, did not disappoint. With the Iron Soul and the successful stabilization of the timeline as proof of human capability, the scientists of Earth moved forward with remarkable speed, building upon the foundation the Iron Soul had laid. Research into temporal mechanics and quantum theory reached new heights, with whole new fields of study dedicated to studying the fractures the Vernex created, tears in the space-time continuum that left the galaxy vulnerable to their manipulations. Earth's military command was brought in to advise, not on how to destroy the Vernex, but how to disrupt their ability to rewrite reality. What was becoming clear was that war with the Vernex wasn't about defeating them through strength alone. It was about understanding their manipulation of time and creating technologies that could fight in time itself. Humanity had to build a new form of weaponry, a kind of temporal warfare. And so, the human race began its most ambitious project to date, the creation of the Kronos fleet. These ships, like the Iron Soul, would not be merely defensive. They would be built to fight the very essence of reality that the Vernex bent to their will. The ships were constructed with an entirely new kind of engine, a hyper-advanced drive system powered by quantum entanglement and temporal anchors, capable of snapping between timelines and resisting any distortion caused by the Vernex. This wasn't just faster than light travel, it was temporal displacement, a technology that allowed humanity to move through time itself. The first test of the Kronos-class ships was a shocking success. These ships didn't simply move across space, they moved through the fracture. They could bend the lines of reality, enabling them to jump through moments in time. Their weapons, too, were revolutionary. More than just plasma cannons or laser beams, they were time-based weapons, weapons designed to slow, disrupt, and even erase the manipulations of the Vernex from existence. No longer would a Vernex ship be able to alter the past and erase humanity's progress. The Kronos class was engineered to strike before the Vernex even thought to act, forcing them into a reactive position. The construction of the Cronus fleet wasn't the only new development, though. Humanity also introduced the concept of parallel defense. It wasn't enough to shield a ship from the Vernex's reality-bending powers. It was essential to prevent the Vernex from erasing the existence of a ship altogether. In response, scientists developed quantum-stabilized shielding, an energy-based defense that created a parallel version of a ship, essentially creating a duplicate of the vessel in a different timeline, making it nearly impossible for the Vernex to target or destroy. The shield itself wasn't just a wall. It was a mirage, a countermeasure against the unpredictability of the Vernex's ability to erase from time. These weapons, ships, and technologies, though still in their infancy, were already proving invaluable. The first full-scale deployment of the Cronus fleet saw an immediate reaction from the Vernex. They had never encountered a civilization capable of fighting their manipulation of time, let alone fighting on their level. The Vernex retaliated with more fracturing anomalies, attempting to destabilize key moments in history to cripple Earth's efforts. But every time they attempted to change the past, humanity adapted and countered, rewriting their own role in time. The Vernex had underestimated the human race in a way that no one else had before. They had assumed that humanity would crumble under the weight of a war against time itself. But humanity's greatest strength wasn't just its technology. It was its resilience, its unwavering belief in its own future. While the Vernex could manipulate the past, humanity had found a way to anchor itself in the present and fight for a future they could shape. As the first full-scale confrontation with the Vernex neared, the Cronus fleet began to make its presence known in the galaxy. The Vernex were no longer the omnipotent, unpredictable force they once were. They were now being challenged, and for the first time in this war, their existence was being threatened, not by overwhelming firepower, but by humanity's indomitable will to rewrite the very rules of reality. The Iron Soul led the way, its temporal anchor holding steady against the swirling chaos of space-time. Behind it, the rest of the Cronus fleet followed, a united force of ships, technologies, and minds, determined to rewrite the story of the galaxy. Humanity had rewritten the rules of war. Now the question remained, could the Vernex, beings who existed outside of time, stand against the relentless human will to bend time to their own designs? The Cronus fleet wasn't just a military force, it was a symbol of humanity's refusal to be rewritten, of its defiance against forces that sought to erase it from existence. As the fleet made its way through the galaxy, each ship stood as a testament to the immense cost and the undying resolve that fueled human ingenuity. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to preserve the essence of what it meant to be human. The Iron Soul led the charge, now the most advanced and battle-hardened ship in existence, its temporal anchor a steady hum at the heart of the fleet. The ship had become a legend, a warship so powerful that it made the Vernex hesitate for the first time since the start of the war. But as the fleet entered Vernex space, a sense of dread began to settle over the human commanders. They had barely begun to understand the full scope of the Vernex's capabilities, and the enemy's next move was already in play. The first major battle on the outskirts of Vernex space began as the Cronus fleet made a bold strike against a known Vernex outpost. The fleet dropped out of temporal displacement in an area marked by several key fractures, ruptures in the fabric of space-time that the Vernex used to manipulate the past and future. As the ships materialized, the tension was palpable. The crew aboard the Iron Soul had trained for this moment, but nothing could prepare them for what they would encounter. The Vernex didn't attack outright. Instead, they unleashed a new weapon, one designed to destabilize the very fabric of space-time itself. At first, it appeared to be a seemingly harmless wave of energy, an anomaly that flickered in the atmosphere like a mirage. But as the energy expanded, it became clear that this was no ordinary weapon. It was a time disruptor, an entity capable of creating micro-fractures within the continuum, making it impossible for anything caught within the wave to remain static in time. Ships, weapons, and even people began to lose their cohesion, flickering in and out of existence. The Iron Soul's temporal anchor roared to life, keeping the ship anchored in time. But even with this technological marvel, the time disruptor had a terrifying effect. The entire fleet was forced to break formation as individual ships were displaced, jumping from one moment to the next, unable to sync with the flow of time. For the first time in the war, humanity found itself out of control. The Vernex weren't just fighting on the battlefield. They were fighting within time itself. Admiral Zara Kessler, commander of the Iron Soul and the fleet, faced a critical decision. If she couldn't restore order to the fleet, the Vernex would scatter humanity's forces and crush them one by one. With no clear solution and the timeline already beginning to destabilize, Kessler turned to her most trusted advisor, Dr. Elias Trevors, a temporal physicist who had worked on the design of the Kronos ships. His expertise in quantum entanglement and temporal dynamics had been vital in creating the fleet's defense systems, but now they needed something more. "Can we fight time itself?" Kessler asked, staring at the swirling fractal of energy that threatened to tear their fleet apart. Trevors didn't hesitate. "We have one chance, but it will take every ounce of what we've built." Kessler nodded, trusting him. It was time to deploy the Kronos Lock, a final safeguard developed during the fleet's construction. The Kronos Lock was a massive quantum field generator that, once activated, would create a localized bubble in time, a pocket where reality remained stable and unchanging. Within this bubble, the fleet could regroup, plan, and fight on their terms. The Vernex's time disruptor might shift the timeline in the vast expanse of space, but it wouldn't be able to break through the Kronos Lock's bubble. However, there was one problem. The Kronos Lock wasn't a passive defense. It required precise timing and energy. If activated too early, it would leave the fleet vulnerable. If activated too late, the entire fleet could be lost to the Vernex's time manipulation. With seconds to decide, Kessler issued the command: "Engage the Kronos Lock." Now, the energy field surged to life, cascading over the fleet like a web of shimmering light. It enveloped the ships, pulling them out of the chaotic flux of fractured time and into a stable pocket. The Vernex, caught off guard by the sudden shift, attempted to retaliate by destabilizing the time disturbance further, but their efforts were futile. They could no longer affect the fleet. They were trapped in their own temporal chaos. For the first time, humanity had created a true defensive advantage. The moment was brief, but it was enough. The fleet, now stable, regained its position in the battle. The Iron Soul and its sister ships launched a coordinated attack against the Vernex outpost, taking advantage of the disruption they had caused. Within moments, the enemy's forces were decimated, and the Vernex's once uncontested dominance over time began to waver. The victory, however, was not absolute. The Vernex were not just a single species. They were a collective of entities, each with their own designs on reality, and the one they had just faced was only a small portion of their power. As humanity pressed forward, they realized the true scope of the challenge. Every victory against the Vernex only uncovered deeper layers of their strange, time-warping capabilities. The battle against the Vernex was more than just a war. It was a fight against an enemy that had no rules, no morals, and no respect for the very structure of time. Yet, as the Kronos fleet set course for its next engagement, there was a sense of something more. Humanity was no longer just a species trying to survive. They had become time's equal. The tools they had developed, the strategies they had employed, and the courage they had shown had proven something crucial. Humanity was not just fighting to preserve its future. They were rewriting the future itself. The Vernex had underestimated humanity's capacity to evolve, to adapt, and to challenge the very forces of the universe. And now, humanity was poised to strike back with the most dangerous weapon in existence: their own ability to rewrite time. The war, though far from over, had entered a new chapter. And this time, the Vernex were the ones on the defensive. Would humanity continue to rewrite the laws of war, or would the Vernex find a way to reclaim their hold over time? The Kronos fleet's latest victory had been monumental, But it was only a temporary reprieve. As the fleet made its way deeper into Vernex's territory, the weight of the war was beginning to show. Humanity had learned, adapted, and fought back. But the Vernex weren't a simple enemy. They were a collective of advanced species bound by a singular purpose: domination through manipulation of time itself. Each victory had come at a cost, and the question on everyone's mind was whether they could continue to outsmart an enemy that bent the laws of reality to their will. Admiral Zara Kessler stood at the helm of the Ironsol, staring out at the vast expanse of stars ahead. The war was no longer a series of isolated skirmishes. It was a battle for the very fabric of existence. With each engagement, humanity was learning more about the Vernex's time-warping weapons, but the deeper they ventured into their territory, the more dangerous the stakes became. The Cronus lock had been a temporary solution, but Kessler knew that it wouldn't be enough to win the war. The Vernex were evolving just as quickly as humanity was. The latest intelligence gathered from the Vernex stronghold revealed that they had developed a new weapon, a massive temporal singularity generator capable of collapsing entire star systems into a singular point in time. The weapon was still in the testing phase, but its potential to alter the course of the war was terrifying. If it worked as theorized, the Vernex could obliterate entire fleets, entire worlds, with a single activation. It was a weapon that could erase all of humanity's progress in the blink of an eye. As Kessler and her team analyzed the data, Dr. Elias Trevors, the fleet's lead temporal physicist, began to speak. "We don't know how the Vernex intend to use this weapon, but if they succeed, it could rewrite history itself. They wouldn't just defeat us in the present, they could erase the very memory of humanity from the timeline. There would be no survivors, no legacy, nothing." The implications were chilling. To defeat humanity was one thing, but to erase its existence entirely, that was a fate worse than death. And it was a fate that the Vernex seemed determined to impose. But Kessler wasn't one to back down from a challenge. She had seen humanity face impossible odds before, and they had always found a way to survive. "We have to stop them," Kessler said, her voice resolute. "We need to find a way to neutralize this weapon before they can use it. If we don't, the future itself is at risk." The fleet's next mission was clear: infiltrate the Vernex stronghold, locate the temporal singularity generator, and destroy it before it could be activated. It would be a high-risk operation, one that required precision and speed. The fleet would have to navigate through a heavily fortified Vernex territory, avoiding detection, while making their way to the heart of the enemy's power. To accomplish this, the Cronus fleet would rely on a new strategy, one that combined the innovative technology of their warships with an old tactic: subterfuge. The Ironsol was equipped with the latest stealth technology, allowing it to slip through enemy radar undetected. Combined with the Cronus lock, they would be able to create a brief window of time during which the fleet could infiltrate the Vernex stronghold. The plan was risky, but it was humanity's only chance. The mission would require the fleet to operate under intense pressure, knowing that if they failed, the Vernex would not just defeat them, they would erase them from the annals of history. As the Cronus fleet neared the Vernex stronghold, Kessler couldn't help but feel the weight of the mission on her shoulders. If they succeeded, it would be a turning point in the war. If they failed, well, failure was no longer an option. The stakes were too high. The fleet dropped out of temporal displacement as they neared the Vernex stronghold. They had one window of opportunity before the enemy detected their presence. The Ironsol and the other ships in the fleet, cloaked in the shimmering veil of stealth technology, slipped into the heavily guarded sector without a trace. It was a moment of silent tension, as each ship moved with the precision of a surgeon's blade, carefully navigating the labyrinth of Vernex defenses. But just as the fleet began its descent into the heart of enemy territory, something unexpected happened. The Ironsol's sensors picked up an anomaly, an energy signature that was unlike anything they had encountered before. It was a temporal signature, but it was different, more erratic, more unstable. Kessler's heart skipped a beat as she realized what was happening. The Vernex had anticipated their move. They knew we were coming, Kessler said, a cold chill running down her spine. They'd been tracking us all along. Dr. Trivers quickly analyzed the data. It's a temporal trap. They've set a collapse point. If we don't move fast, we'll be caught in a time loop that could trap us forever. It was a race against time, literally. The fleet had to move faster than the collapsing temporal field to reach the singularity generator and destroy it before the Vernex could activate it. Every second counted. The fleet was now in the belly of the beast, and failure meant complete annihilation. Kessler issued the order to accelerate. The Iron Soul and its fleet surged forward, weaving through a maze of Vernex defenses and temporal disruptions. The pressure was immense, but the crew was determined. They had fought too hard to let it all slip away now. As the fleet neared the heart of the Vernex stronghold, the Cronus fleet was hit by a barrage of enemy fire. The Vernex had activated their defense systems, but it was clear that they were not prepared for the sheer power of humanity's warships. The Iron Soul's weapons systems came online, cutting through enemy ships with surgical precision. For the first time, humanity's warships were in their element, unleashing their full power, not just against Vernex forces, but against the very time distortions they had come to rely on. "We're almost there," Kessler shouted, her voice fierce. "Keep pushing forward. The future depends on it." In the final moments of the battle, the Iron Soul broke through the enemy's last line of defense and reached the temporal singularity generator. But even as they prepared to destroy it, the Vernex launched their final gambit, a direct attack on the fleet's temporal systems, aiming to trap them in an infinite time loop. It was now or never. The Cronus lock engaged for the final time, creating a bubble of stability around the Iron Soul and its fleet. With seconds to spare, Kessler ordered the launch of the fleet's most powerful weapon, the Temporal Disruptor. A single shot, aimed directly at the core of the singularity generator, would neutralize the weapon and prevent the Vernex from rewriting history. As the beam struck its target, a shockwave of temporal energy erupted, sending ripples through the fabric of space-time. The singularity generator exploded in a brilliant flash, and the Vernex's hold on time was shattered. The Cronus fleet had succeeded, but at what cost? The moment the temporal disruptor's beam connected with the Vernex's temporal singularity generator, everything changed. The fabric of reality itself seemed to stretch, crack, and then collapse in on itself with a blinding pulse of energy. The Iron Soul and the rest of the fleet braced themselves as a shockwave of temporal distortion rippled outward, sending violent waves through space. In that instant, time itself was thrown into chaos. For a few agonizing seconds, it felt as though the universe had stopped. The stars flickered, and the usual hum of the fleet's engines was replaced by an eerie dead silence. Then, as quickly as it had happened, the distortion receded. The temporal singularity generator was gone, obliterated into nothingness, leaving behind a vast, empty void where once there had been an impenetrable Vernex stronghold. Admiral Kessler stood at the bridge of the Iron Soul, staring at the aftermath of the battle. The fleet had survived, but the cost had been immense. Many of the ships in the fleet had taken heavy damage, some barely holding together. The Iron Soul herself was battered, though still functional. But it wasn't the physical damage that weighed heavily on Kessler. It was the realization that, despite their victory, humanity was still far from safe. "We've won," Kessler said, her voice low and uncertain. "But what have we won?" Dr. Trivers, standing beside her, looked out at the shattered remnants of the Vernex stronghold, the twisted wreckage of enemy ships floating in the vacuum of space. "We've broken the Vernex's grip on time. But they'll come back. They're resourceful, and they won't forget this defeat." Kessler nodded grimly. She had always known that the war with the Vernex wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about rewriting the rules of warfare itself. The battle for Earth had begun with a distress signal from a desperate alien race. But it had evolved into something much more profound. Humanity had stepped into a new chapter, one where they were no longer the prey, but the hunters. "This war is far from over," Kessler said, her voice gaining strength. "But we've shown them that humanity is not to be underestimated. They thought they could erase us from existence, but they were wrong. We are the masters of our own future." As the fleet regrouped and began repairs, Kessler gathered her officers for a debriefing. They had achieved something that no one, not even the most seasoned military strategist, could have predicted. They had taken on the Vernex, a civilization that wielded the very essence of time as a weapon, and they had come out victorious. But victory came at a cost. The Vernex were relentless, and they had learned from every battle. Humanity had won a single crucial battle, but the war was far from over. In the coming months, Kessler knew that the Vernex would retaliate with new weapons, new tactics, and perhaps even new alliances. Humanity's moment of triumph had been hard-earned, but the future was still uncertain. One thing was clear, however: humanity had proved something fundamental to the universe, that they would never back down in the face of insurmountable odds. The Kronos fleet had rewritten the rules of war, and humanity had proven that they could adapt, overcome, and fight on no matter what. The Vernex had underestimated their resolve, and now the entire galaxy knew the true strength of humanity. As the debriefing ended, Kessler looked around at her crew, tired, wounded, but resolute. The fight had taken its toll, but they had achieved the impossible. The war with the Vernex had changed everything. It had brought humanity to the edge of extinction, but it had also given them the chance to define their future. But as Kessler turned back to the stars, she knew that the battle for the galaxy wasn't just about military might. It was about something deeper. It was about the will to survive, to preserve everything that made humanity unique. It was about the collective strength of the human spirit, the unwavering determination to protect their home, their people, and the legacy they had built. The Kronos fleet had shown the universe what humanity was capable of. Now the question remained: what would they do with this newfound power? In the vastness of space, beyond the reaches of the Kronos fleet, the Vernex were already regrouping. Their commanders, bruised and battered by their defeat, were plotting their next move. They had learned much from the humans, but they had underestimated the most dangerous aspect of humanity: their adaptability. The war was far from over, and while the Kronos fleet had won a battle that would echo through the ages, the next chapter was already being written. Humanity had made its mark, but the true test was yet to come. But in this moment, as the Iron Soul and its fleet drifted through the cosmos, there was no question left in Kessler's mind. They had changed the rules of war, and humanity had written the first line of a new story, one in which they were no longer the underdogs, but the ones who shaped the future. And that future would be theirs.